day I wake up is another blessing. Thankful every second, getting God's protection. I lost connection in the desert, I had no reception. But in that time alone, I probably learned 1,000 lessons. I used my time for introspection and some self-reflection, and analyzed a couple ways to conquer my depression. Everything doesn't happen the way we plan it to, but if we harvest energy, then we can plan it too. So take a look in my eyes, that's where the story...
Let's see what's going on with the Microsoft purchase of Activision Blizzard. See if this is gonna go their way or not. Hopefully, if Microsoft does get them, we fix a couple of these issues with the Overwatch and the World of Warcraft and the Call of Duties. We got Spawn Wave. Yeah, make sure y'all check out Spawn Wave and Young. Make sure you check out Young as well. But they're two good news gaming news sources. But let's check out what Spawn Wave got to say. Why does that keep
getting
happening?
Kind of tired of the Activision, Microsoft, FTC stuff that's been ongoing for more than a year now. Well, I have good news.
Has it been more than a year already?
It's silence. Why? Because it seems to be finally over. At least the court case, the hearings that have been ongoing for the last week or so, they wrapped things up. They had their closing arguments after 4 or 5 days of hearings and all of this. And now we're going to see the decision for this, I believe, revealed and made public this week coming up. At least that's the anticipation currently. But I kind of wanted to go over just the madness that took place, because there were definitely some highlights.
So if I remember correctly, UK said no, but they might appeal that, they might not. The EU came up with some stipulations before they said yes. Microsoft said cool with that, and I believe the EU was like, alright, good to go, and we're just waiting for the FTC over here in the US to see what they gonna do. And now Microsoft has some ammunition for their appeal with the UK because of the whole setup that the EU came up with. So let's see what's on the US's mind.
And some interesting bits of information that came out of all of this. So if you guys enjoy the video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel. So
I think I got that right.
The entirety of this case is essentially boiling down to Microsoft being able to spend $70 billion. The FTC is working right now to have a preliminary injunction put in place so that they can gather more information and essentially revisit this in, to my understanding, another case in August or September. But remember, Microsoft is supposed to get this deal wrapped up by the 3rd week in July. Otherwise, they have to either renegotiate with Activision Blizzard, or they have to walk away but still pay Activision Blizzard $3 billion. And it appears, based on some of the information that's come out from the hearings, that there's a very good chance, if they are not able to complete this transaction or this sale in that amount of time.
So by the 3rd week in July, if the deal goes through, Bobby gets his billies and he gets to go away. If it doesn't go through, he still gets a couple of billies and then he just stays. What? Oh God. He still gets the money. He still gets billies. He still gets billions. Let's get Bobby out of here. Come on. Damn, 70 billion for Blizzard. Microsoft must be off their heads. Now, remember, it's not just Blizzard. It's Blizzard, Activision, and whatever the mobile thing is. The guys that do Candy Crush and stuff. I think 70 billion for all three of those. I think it's King. team or whatever the heck it is. The guys that do all the mobile games. So that's what they're paying $70 billion for. So they're paying for Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, and all the money that the mobile games are making. Yeah, they gotta pay that $70 billion. But the thing about it is, Microsoft got that. They like, take it. Give me the video games. It's just, you know, the business, the bureaus, the alphabet soup letters, they holding everything up.
That Activision Blizzard might just walk away from it. So it's definitely pressing for Microsoft to get this done, and a lot of it comes down to, yes, this injunction and if the FTC has granted it or not by the judge. Now, what we started to find out is, well, a number of things. The big one is that Microsoft appeared to be looking around and attempting to buy almost everyone. Like, it was to the point where it wouldn't have been shocking if Nintendo showed up again, although Microsoft technically tried to buy Nintendo when they were first showing up on the scene with the original Xbox. So
I remember that.
You kind of marked that one off your bingo card already. However, Sega and Square Enix were both brought up, and it seems like they were close, at least, to maybe making an offer or approaching either one of them, because
Microsoft
they had some serious plans already drafted up, even to where
livid.
They were looking as to how they would distribute some of their titles and what some of the reasons are that they would pick up Sega or Square Enix. And a lot of it came down to the mobile side of things, which also plays into the idea of them maybe trying to get Zynga, but they missed out on that. And Activision Blizzard King, of course, fitting into the mobile side of things here. We also had Sony. Some of the information that they had redacted by the courts appeared to just kind of get out there because they used permanent marker over things, and you can play around with saturation, highlights, all of this, and be able to see through those black marks that are on the paper. Which means we saw the development budgets for Last of Us Part 2 and Horizon Forbidden West, roughly around $210 to $220 million for the development of each. Remember, there is still an entire marketing side of things for the budget. It's possible that these projects
make the video game
$400 million each. And I assume we are going to see much higher budgets than that with games like Grand Theft Auto 6. So that's, game budgets. Certainly something to keep an eye on here when it comes to the creativity
$200 million
risk-taking, we'll
budgets,
say, by
bro.
some of these larger publishers with these big-time
Do we really
games.
need all that?
We also had Satya
We don't
Nadella
really need all that.
show up, testify.
Like, how many people are actually looking at backgrounds and while they're playing video games, like, oh snap, look at this in the background. Like, come on, bro. 200 million? For what? Motion capture and stuff? Actors, I guess? What is that being spent on? Jeez.
Say that he doesn't like the exclusive nature of consoles right now, specifically the exclusivity for game releases.
Play a Hollow Knight any day. Give me one of those.
Sony's not like the
200
first.
million?
They didn't show up and introduce exclusives. I mean,
Yeah,
Nintendo had been doing it before then. I know a lot of that had to do with the way Nintendo would treat kind of the market with their Nintendo seal of quality and leaning on some of these companies to make sure they have that set up and all this. But I mean, this has been going on for a long time, and they're mostly pointing at Sony because they're right across the table from them as their primary competitor. But the idea of there being no game exclusives is kind of a controversial topic in the first place, because growing up, obviously, I became used to exclusives, right? And at some points, we had exclusives take advantage of custom features of consoles, which is slowly been fading away more and more as these systems have become PCs in smaller boxes. Having like the emotion engine or the cell processor being taken full advantage of, which third parties would not necessarily do, but the first parties would.
The consoles are just going to be
I mean,
PCs.
you needed exclusives for that to happen. However, Nintendo leverages exclusives. I mean, like completely, right? They're constantly selling their hardware tied into their software. And I do wonder what a world would look like without any kind of exclusive games, and if we would still have three platform holders, because I kind of feel like we wouldn't. And would we have one system? Would we have at least a choice of between two? It's hard to say, because someone still has to make the box that these games.
Like my guess would be that they'll get rid of Xbox and just make it PC stuff, and just go get a PC, guys. Play it on a PC. Everything's gonna go digital anyway. They're gonna be like, it's a PC. Just go get a PC and integrate all the Xbox stuff into the PC. I don't know what PlayStation is gonna do. PlayStation's gonna have to keep making boxes, because if not, they just gonna become a freaking studio, right? So they gotta keep making boxes. Same for Nintendo. Yeah, man.
Release
interesting.
It's
future.
not necessarily going to become an all PC future or even all anytime soon. I still think we're well off of that right at this time. Not necessarily saying it wouldn't happen, and if it did, then yeah, maybe exclusives would be a thing of the past, because it would basically just release to an application on your TV or on your phone, or yeah, technically on your PC. Hey, think about that. Maybe we don't even need PC gaming anymore. We just stream everything.
Oh no, we're not doing that.
Your Celeron processor on your laptop. We also heard from Bobby Kotick, and he seemed to downplay subscription services quite heavily. He was asked about the idea of Call of Duty going into a subscription service, basically like Game Pass, which is obviously one of the big focal points here during these hearings, and he didn't seem interested at all in Call of Duty going into them day one. And in fact, he mentioned that having it there at launch would negatively impact finances of these games. And I don't necessarily think he's incorrect, obviously, for third parties, because if you have it in a subscription service, people will sign up for that service rather than buy the game outright. And if you're Activision Blizzard, how much money do you have to ask from Microsoft to put it into Game Pass? Probably whatever you're projecting your initial launch sales to be. And that's probably why we don't see Call of Duty show up in Game Pass. It would just be way too expensive for a limited amount of time. But obviously, Microsoft coming in and buying Activision Blizzard would pretty much remedy that entire situation. And Bobby Kotick also talked about the next system after the Switch, and really he showed regret as to not being on the Switch immediately with Call of Duty, kind of like what they were with the Wii, where they put everything Call of Duty related just about on the Wii. I mean, there's a lot of Call of Duty games there, and you can play some of them still to this day online. They were even there for the Wii U in some capacity, not for the Switch at all. And he basically like, yeah, I misjudged that. We should have been there for the Switch. But it seems like they're at least thinking about the next generation system from Nintendo, and who knows, maybe they're already trying to figure out how to make that work in the first year or two with that platform, but they don't have any knowledge of the specifications for it. No dev kits, and he was making a bit of a guess when he talked about PS4 and Xbox One comparability in terms of power. But either way, that headline circulated quite heavily online. We don't really know anything more than we did before, other than
people are talking
about Activision Blizzard probably should have had some Call of Duty ready to go in the first 3 years on the Switch, and they kind of missed that mark. Oh, and while we're on the topic of the Switch, there was a tug of war the entire 4 or 5 days on if the Switch is in direct competition with Microsoft and Sony for their Xbox and PS5, or if it's not, if it's off on its own sector, I guess, monopolizing the blue ocean strategy, or I don't know, something there. And that continuously came up. And to me, I mean, it's part of the entertainment sector. People go into a store and they decide if they're going to, let's say they have all the systems, they may decide that the Switch is more convenient for a certain game as opposed to the PlayStation 5 or the Xbox where they're tethered to their TV. They might be willing to give up some of that graphical fidelity so that they can have it on the go. And in that case, you would buy a Switch game rather than an Xbox game, as in there would be competition and technically money going to Nintendo rather than Xbox. I think the best part about all of this, though, is we got to see how some of these executives really talk to each other behind the scenes in these different emails, and it's kind of how you imagine. Like, it's not as formal, obviously, because they'll take shots at the competition in emails that when they were writing them probably didn't think were going to show up in the public court and just kind of thrown out there for everyone to see. Like Matt Booty saying that they're in the position to they can spend Sony out of business, which now doesn't look great based on the things they're saying. Or you have a conversation between Jim Ryan
and then that
Chris
came out right
Deering
before the
when
FTC's decision.
Microsoft was planning to acquire Activision Blizzard, that they would be better off buying and presenting an electric car. You know, it does make me wonder what fun nicknames Microsoft has behind the scenes of some of these emails for the PlayStation VR 2. Oh, and part of these emails, we did find out that Microsoft was indeed holding back some of the chips from going into like consumer consoles, the Xbox Series X and I guess S, in order to put them into the cloud. So they did make a bet on their data centers and installing and standing up server blades, or really systems, Xbox Series systems. As remember, they were mentioning that they were upgrading that. The chips got to come from somewhere. You can't produce an infinite amount of chips at an infinite accelerated rate. There are limits, and they unfortunately had to make the judgment call of removing some from the Xbox Series X pile for manufacturing.
I don't understand how
that's
Microsoft
basically
don't
why
make their
all
own
of a sudden
chips.
we're hearing Phil Spencer say that they are significantly increasing Xbox Series X consoles, probably because they're just about wrapped up with what they
the longest
need
time
in
I
order
thought they
to
made their own
upgrade the
stuff.
initial wave for their data center, and now we're going to start seeing more and more Xbox Series X and technically S consoles show up in stores. But on Thursday, they did wrap everything up with closing arguments, which was mostly just the judge grilling either side, and at one point the FTC had to tag in different lawyers and change things up, and it was kind of a madhouse based on some of the play-by-play that was going on Twitter. There was one really funny thing that took place where the judge, who you have to remember, like, the judge isn't in the weeds with the video game stuff over the past several years or decade, or even have been following the Xbox and the PlayStation and the Switch, but she kind of came to an interesting conclusion looking around. She at least brought up the possibility that the Switch is actually better than the Gen 9 consoles, the PS5 and the Xbox Series, simply because you can plug it into your TV or you can have it portably and take it to the airport. Like, the functionality of that, in her mind at that time, was, hey, you know, this could be better just because it's able to do more. Like, you can't do that with the Xbox Series or the PS5. Yeah, sure, it does like 4K and all of that, but I can't take it to the airport, at least not easily. But it was interesting to kind of get that very brief view from a person who would be considered in the mainstream when it comes to gaming, that, yeah, there appears to be a lot of value in what the Switch can do, technically at a cheaper price point than the PS5 and then the Xbox Series X, solely on the fact
the Switch is older
that
also.
it can switch. So anyway, at the end of this hectic week, people are, of course, wondering what is about to happen here. Did the FTC win? Are they going to get their injunction that will throw a wrench into Microsoft's plans? Or is Microsoft going to be allowed to just go ahead and acquire Activision Blizzard and kind of work out the fine details with the FTC and the CMA after the fact? And to be honest, no one really knows. I mean, you can look around and try to analyze what was said and all this, but it's hard to say, based on the information that's out there, which way the judge is going to go with this thing. I mean, she could say, you know what? I want to see more. I think the cloud aspect is compelling enough, and that it could damage consumers in the long run, that I need to hear more. I need to see a bigger deep dive from the FTC. Or she could say, you know what, there's not enough there. Microsoft, go ahead and do your thing. Spend $70 billion, acquire Activision Blizzard, and work it out with some sort of concession and stuff with the FTC down the line. But let me know what you guys thought about all of this down below. It certainly turned into a bit of a circus over the last week, but let me know what you thought, or the highlights from this entire situation. And also, what do you think is going to happen? I think next week, when we have basically the results published.
Oh,
thanks,
that
guys,
means
for
sometime
watching,
this week.
and I'll see you next time.
Later, John. All right, I think that's his name, John. Yeah, man. Guess it's a toss-up. The only place right now that messed the whole thing up is UK. But it looks like US could go either way. FTC could go either way. Hopefully. But it also seems like the judge, what he said about the judge talking about the Nintendo stuff, it seems like she gets a little bit. You know what I mean? Hopefully she's like, whatever, take it. You can have it. You can have it. Make video games. Do the stuff, whatever you're gonna do with video games.
I'm hiding out, wilding out, cooling down, collecting thoughts till I find my route. And if they catch me, they'll be finding out what I'm about. Until then, I'm riding out. I'm hiding out, wilding out, cooling down, collecting thoughts till I find my route. And if they catch me, they'll be finding out what I'm about. Until then, I'm riding out, riding out. Check it out. I'm a desperado, I'm living it in real life. What's next to follow? I hit the bottle.